The title tonight is Most Schools Spread a Cultural Disease. Did you ever wonder where schools came from and where they're going ever since you graduated or dropped out or got thrown out? I couldn't stop thinking about that. The title of the talk is Most Schools Transmit a Cultural Disease. When someone's sick, we don't blame them. They're not at fault, but we do things to take care of them. It doesn't matter if they aren't doing it the way we think it should be done. That's the manifestation of an infection of culture. And that's what we need to fight. We don't need to fight them. We don't, punish people for being sick. We care for them. So that's the challenge. Thank you all for coming, the select few. My name is Don Berg, and I'm going to tell you a story. But it's a story that I think is really important to embed our movement in deeper understanding of how things are working. For those who don't know, my background, my degree is in psychology, and my framework for looking at almost everything to do with education is self-determination theory. I did research on a couple of democratic schools, the Village Free School in Portland, Oregon, and also a school called Village Home Education Resource Center, also in Portland, which actually they share the village part, but they're not actually related. But I showed that kids in those schools maintain intrinsic motivation, which is different from all the mainstream schools. So I actually homeschooled other people's kids before that. And so that was my entree into democratic education before I had those words for it. I was doing a consensus-run small group, using the community as the primary learning resource, and really engaging with kids in a way that was respectful of them and democratic in the way that we define it here. Except it wasn't until years later that I discovered this community. I discovered my first IDEC was in Vancouver, Canada, which is, I think, 2008. And then I've been trying to have an influence ever since. So, because I had the background, the story I'm going to tell weaves together a number of scholarly ideas, and there's the format of it is one I got from a viral video, so there's a lot of threads coming together. But one of the things I realized, and that recently the reason it became part of my book, is because Joyce and I read to each other as part of what we do. And one of the books we just reread was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the things he talks about in that book is overstories. There are certain kinds of stories that shape how people are in society. And so I'd been working on this story for years, like I said, about 15 years. And I realized, I'm trying to write an overstory. So, the title tonight is Most Schools Spread a Cultural Disease. Did you ever wonder where schools came from and where they're going ever since you graduated or dropped out or got thrown out? I couldn't stop thinking about that. So I did some research. I discovered that only schools for the elite existed until the Industrial Revolution, when the current schools for the masses were invented. Momentary interruption. My great-grandfather wrote his thesis for Teachers College in New York, advocating for the Prussian system. Very interesting. So my family is part of this story. The ideas of age segregation, dividing the day into class periods, ringing bells to change classes, letter grades, report cards, and many other features of most schools today were designed to ensure that children would be well trained to behave as if they were a cog in the production engine of an industrial factory. The central actors in this type of schooling are first teachers, who deliver academic content into the heads of obedient students. Second are administrators, who make sure the teachers and students have the right incentives to produce the instructional bookkeeping, such as test scores, grades, and degrees, diplomas, that are supposed to tell everyone how well the kids did. That seemed reasonable. But I looked into it a little more deeply. I've spent over 30 years studying schooling and education. And you know what I found out? That's not the whole story. Everyone says the system is in crisis. The mainstream media and the usual experts all tell us that the crisis must be caused by bad instruction, or bad teachers, or bad incentives, bad administrators, bad test scores, or bad students. Based on this idea, the system looks fine because it seems like a nice feedback loop. Seems manageable. A feedback loop for delivering content. But the truth is that they're forced to tell us that one or more of those elements are bad because there's no other options in their model. The real crisis is that they've completely missed the problem. The global mainstream education system is in crisis because it expects people to act like data processing machines, and real human beings do not act like robots. We are not robots. Robots will relentlessly and unquestioningly deal with data without regard for family or friends, because robots have neither family nor friends. But we humans do have family and friends, and we will not ignore them in favor of processing data deliveries. We humans have agency, which, despite some techno-enthusiasts might claim, robots do not have. Also, humans, especially young ones, who have never been given the opportunity to practice expressing their agency through creativity nor making important decisions about what to do with their one wild and precious life, will not be creative and will not make good decisions. Treating human beings like robots is not okay, but school systems do it every day. The truth is that you have to give children lots of opportunities to be creative and make important decisions in order for them to map out how to work within a community. Children must use their agency in order to make useful mental maps of how to be a productive member of a community. Education is not about content delivery. Education is about children becoming agents of goodness, truth, beauty, and joy. The word agency has multiple meanings in English that can get lost when translated into other languages. It refers to having individual power to express yourself, a form of organization, an agency. And when a person is an agent, it means the individual has the authority to represent the collective interests of an organization. This combination of meanings elegantly evokes how we each have simultaneous responsibility for both individual and collective needs. Unfortunately, our culture was infected with a pathogen that hides from us this idea of simultaneously practicing individual and collective responsibility. But before I explain the truth about schools in more detail, let's review the story of school that is implied in textbooks and common usage, but that mainstream media and the usual experts usually leave out. A few thousand years ago, human civilization popped into existence, equipped with sacred books that contain the absolute truth about who we are and how we should be. Of course, it was only logical that since books contained such powerful wisdom, the ability to create books by manipulating symbols must be the most important skill to have. According to this view, the key to passing wisdom, symbol manipulation skills, and therefore our power and wisdom, from one generation to the next, is the institution of school. It was assumed that dutifully accepting guidance from the book caused success and prosperity. Therefore, children must have those skills delivered to them, or they will not be able to make a valuable contribution to society. But at first, access to schools and the skills of the book were restricted to the elite. Then, just a few hundred years ago, science came along and proved even more efficiently that manipulating symbols is really powerful. Theories and equations were discovered that did an uncannily good job of describing how the universe worked. The books produced by science were not deemed sacred, but they began to give those who could understand them seemingly miraculous powers. These developments just made it all the more obvious that manipulating symbols must be the most important skill to have. And we, the people of the book, succeeded like never before, although our success brought problems too. Lots of us were flocking to the industrial cities where more people lived together than ever before, and chaos reigned. There were disease epidemics and industrial pollution and more violence than we can imagine. Inspired by the very scientific industrial revolution that was causing the chaos, we humans cleverly reorganized our schools, like we organized our new factories and nobly started down the path to making everyone literate. Our developmental scientists, especially despite disagreeing about just about everything else, came to the consensus that symbolic mastery must be the developmental imperative for children 6 to 12 years old. We invented efficient management techniques that enabled school administrators to manipulate the incentives to operate in the classroom with scientific accuracy based on the measurement of student outcomes. We redesigned the schools to reflect both our heritage as people of the book, who deserve their good fortune, and we also borrowed ideas from the scientific management of the factories that were making us a global force. Thus, we transformed ourselves from the people of the book into the people of the book factory. Since that change, schools have been charged with generously sharing the secret to our success by making children learn how to manipulate symbols. As we have spread throughout the world, we have enabled more and more humans to live at a level that would have been the envy of the richest people of the distant past. The scientific industrial complex has transformed the world and given us global dominion. But our success is once again forcing us to face difficult problems. And as people of the book factory, we have faith that our symbol manipulations will guide us to the technological innovations that we need to survive and live happily ever after. Of course, that is not the whole story. There's a lot missing. The truth is, the majority of human existence was completely left out. And of course, we humans did not have literacy and schools from the beginning of our existence. Literacy and so-called civilization were developed from at least 50,000 years of storytelling. And even before that, the stage on which we humans arrived was set by over 3 billion years of life's evolution. The real story of schools starts a long time ago. In fact, it starts at a time when you would not have even recognized the Earth. Unlike now, billions of years ago, the Earth was just a regular Joe planet, like all the others. It was pretty wet, but there was hardly any oxygen. The atmosphere had a whole lot more sulfur, which is normal for regular Joe planets. So, the early Earth was doing what most planets do, cooling down from a very hot beginning by discarding a bunch of that energy into space, dissipating that energy. Then something happened. In the soup of chemicals that made our planet wet, there emerged some molecules that didn't just randomly dissipate energy like all the others. They got organized and dissipated that energy more efficiently than ever before. Each of those molecules decided to accept the constraints of working together. That means that each molecule individually didn't have as much freedom. But as a whole system of molecules, they had completely new freedoms that were better, and it was cool. Those molecules were so cool because they figured out how to respond to the changes in the environment as the dissipation process occurred. Variations in the organization of that process eventually led some of them to accept even more constraints in order to have even more fun by working together. They arranged themselves into a system that could both respond to the environment and replicate themselves, so they keep partying together. These molecules did something that might have been a first in the whole universe. They made the party permanent by creating the first living cells on Earth. These cells were a molecular party celebrating the dissipation of energy. That momentous transition was the beginning of learning, and it kicked off the first population explosion. Now, the thing about great parties like that is that you eventually have to pay the piper. In this case, those first cells were having a great time deep in the oceans, but direct sunlight was too much energy all at once, so it could kill them. And you know how it is, popular spots get crowded. Naturally, the life replicated itself right into all the easy places to live, so some cells eventually ended up being forced to live near the surface, where the sunlight could be lethal. This is where the creative organization of life came in handy. Some of the cells living in danger near the surface decided to turn this problem into an opportunity. They invented photosynthesis by focusing their ability to channel that energy on the water molecules around them. They channeled that potentially deadly solar radiation into breaking apart an H2O molecule. They used the two hydrogen atoms to dissipate the energy more efficiently, thus saving their lives, and exhaled the toxic oxygen. Since they were living in water, it just bubbled right out of their home and into the atmosphere. Photosynthesis kicked off an even greater explosion of population and changed the entire planet in the process. So, once again, life got back into party mode. Remember that oxygen is a pretty uncommon thing on a regular Joe planet. So, when life went on this multi-billion-year binge, replicating itself throughout the early oceans, that oxygen eventually started to accumulate in the atmosphere. Photosynthetic life naturally filled up all the easy places to live, and once again, the piper called for compensation. There came a time when they had to face the fact that their own waste product was becoming unavoidable. In fact, they created a global environmental crisis. You know what happened? Creativity saved them again. Some of the organisms faced with imminent death by oxygen poisoning found a way to transform the toxin into a nutrient. They figured out how to breathe the oxygen, and once that happened, the party kicked into overdrive. Oxygen breathers were such successful energy dissipation processes, new forms of cooperative organization emerged, like organisms becoming multicellular. Species were constantly specialized to fit ecological niches. Life further diversified to encompass every area of the planet, both in the oceans and on land. But if their niche changed too fast and they failed to adapt, extinction. The diversity of life exploded and contracted a couple of times, including the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. And eventually primates emerged, then humans, and we, who are the ultimate ecological generalists. Now, each group of humans created their own unique story about how the gods created them as just one form of life that exists within the sacred hoop. Their job was to maintain the integrity of the sacred hoop through their religious rituals and stories. Most important to our story is that they left their fates in the hands of the gods. Every group of humans passed on to their children a unique story about how living properly in their ecological niche worked. But they all believed that as long as they acted as keepers of the sacred hoop, then all would be well. The keepers of this were so successful that they overcrowded the easiest places to live. And eventually, some people were forced to live in danger where harsh conditions made living extremely difficult. The piper made another comeback. Then one day, a tribe figured out that the gods were about to wipe them out. And they decided very creatively, to take the fate into their own hands. They were infected by a cultural meme that for the presumed benefit of some people, they could undermine the well-being of other people. These were our ancestors, who developed a new story about how we could be powerful like the gods. We broke the sacred hoop and swooped out of those dangerous lands to conquer our neighbors and began subjugating people and lands in the hope that we could take control of fate. We, the breakers of the sacred hoop, have been subjugating and controlling so long that we can change the environment itself in response to changes in our human story. We developed writing, and under the influence of our breaker infection, began to endlessly repeat exactly the same story, religious stories, as if they were the absolute truth, independent of where they originated. We invented schools to ensure that symbol manipulation skills for creating sacred books would be passed along, cultural infection and all. The development of the book led us eventually to the development of the factory, which became the final piece that gave us dominion over every ecology on the planet. Our cultural infection led us to combine them to become the people of the book factory. And we spread both the breaker story and the book factory schools across the globe. Breaker schools embody the story of how important it is to be in control by managing everything that a child does. Adults in book factory schools notice that children are sometimes reluctant to submit to the boring tasks associated with being made to learn symbol manipulation. Since those symbol manipulation skills are an absolute good for breakers, the infection makes it seem both logically necessary and morally correct for the adults to control the children so that they learn the skills necessary for success. This moral delusion causes adults to inadvertently do psychological harm to children and their colleagues, as evidenced by the pervasive disengagement that has been consistently observed ever since valid measures were developed by psychologists. With surprising speed and unanimity, breaker scientists mistakenly declared that symbolic mastery to be the primary developmental imperative for 6 to 12-year-old children. Thus, they conveniently reinforced the very assumptions about schooling that had been designed into breaker schools long before science came along. Breaker schools are exclusively devoted to the symbol manipulation skills of our breaker ancestors, and they utterly neglect the deeper lessons from our keeper ancestors and from life itself. Breaker schools act as if they believe in the content delivery theory of education. Regardless of what they say about what they are doing, they are systematically treating children as if they lack value until after teachers have delivered valuable academic content into their heads. And they account for the delivery of the content by having the children regurgitate the content on command. The children learn from those behaviors that their value as human beings is contingent upon their scores and or grades. In breaker schools, children are not regarded as valuable until after they've proven that they did what they were told to do. Children are expected to abandon their agency except to the degree that it can be applied in a way that's approved by the adults in charge. So now, we breakers have been so successful at our own planetary transformation processes that we put ourselves in danger by fouling our nest with our own waste, and we are now at risk of extinction, like the dinosaurs. The piper is calling. We are now, like it or not, agents who are capable of changing the way our world works. If we take the history of life seriously, we need to recognize that the keepers of the sacred hoop had it partly right. We can be wiped out if we do not recognize our proper place in the world. We will kill ourselves if we do not renounce our aspiration to control fate, and in schools, renounce our aspirations to control children. We need to mend the sacred hoop and act as co-creators with all the rest of life and the universe, because complete control of fate is impossible. We need to embrace and nurture sacred stories that help us to live sustainably. It is time for us to become menders of the sacred hoop. We need to honor the power of the sacred mystery that can both bless us with health and wealth, and also curse us with death via volcanoes, tsunamis, disease, our fellow humans, meteorites, and many other means. Schools need to realize that the most elementary lesson we need to learn from our ancestors is a proper attitude towards the world and our proper place in it. Delivering units of content is secondary. Academic skills are not as important as our breaker culture assumes them to be. The perceived necessity of acquiring symbol manipulation skills is a byproduct of the breaker infection. In reality, symbol manipulation is merely a tool that can be used for good or ill. Symbols are useful tools, but their manipulation should not be treated as an end in itself. Symbols need to be treated as one of many tools we can use to express our agency in the world. Healthy and hearty children need to practice using their agency in community. They do not need to learn to use any specific tool until they individually realize how useful it could be to express their agency. Unlike breaker schools, mender schools act as if they believe in the growing mental maps theory of education. They focus on agency, the agency of everyone in their schools, and they strive to achieve catalytic pedagogy. A pedagogy becomes catalytic when children are treated as if they are inherently valuable and who happen to need to figure out how to use their agency to make a productive contribution to life. Mender schools structure their community to support children in a process of discovering how their unique talents and gifts can create value. They encourage the children to express their agency by engaging with the world and figuring out what valued contributions they can make to it. They know that children will succeed in life as long as they are healthy and hearty. Therefore, they hold each other accountable by assessing the well-being of the children. Mender school folks know they are educating the children well, but they can observe the growing skillfulness and creativity with which the children navigate self-selected challenges and pursue goals and aspirations that are relevant to both themselves and their community. And when a child's actions may destroy value instead of creating it, they carefully help the child realize the consequences of their actions and help them redirect their efforts to more valuable ends. We need to teach our children how to be both the masters of their own attention and wise decision makers who have compassion for all of the life around them that will be impacted by the decisions they make. We can help them realize how the constraints of living in a nurturing community are worth the hassle. Collectively, we create new freedoms that can't exist except when we individually play our part within the larger community. When we mend the sacred hoop, perhaps we will be able to party on in harmony with the rest of life and figure out how to live happily ever after. Fortunately, we do not have to invent mender schools from scratch. There are schools around the world that put attitude before academics and are on the path to mending the sacred hoop, even though they may not call it that. I call them agentic schools. They are currently few and far between, so it will take some effort to scale agentic schools up and help other schools transform to meet the challenge, but it can be done. The good thing about having such a vast challenge is that there are lots of places to intervene. There are people in all kinds of schools working on respecting diversity, more equitable use of resources, more participation in decision-making, better access to healthy food, altering schedules to better support the sleep patterns of teens. All of this work, and more, is really important. But things are really going to start moving when people see the connections. When we see the big picture of how all good pedagogies build on the foundation of well-being. When people throughout the system get united, we can heal our school system of the breaker infection. What we really need to chuck is that old school mindset that learning is just content delivery. There's a new school of thinking on our priorities in education, and it's based on growing mental maps, learner-centered teaching, nurturing the children and teachers, creating holistic equity, listening to students' voices, teacher-powered schools, achieving catalytic pedagogy, self-directed education, restorative justice, rights-respecting schools, and many more. It's already happening. Some say it's unrealistic, idealistic. It can't happen. But I say that those who are unrealistic are those who want to continue with the old path. That's dreaming. Remember, breaker schools didn't just happen. They're not like gravity and we just have to live with it. People created this cultural infection and we're people too. So let's create something new. Let's work together to become menders of the sacred hoop by fighting the epidemic of disengagement, promoting established agentic schools, and helping leaders to transform their breaker schools into mender schools. The transformation of the system is going to be a big challenge, but if we work together, we will succeed. Thank you very much. I'm not under the illusion that this is a terrific story. I'm not under the impression that I'm a great storyteller. What I'm looking for, this is the first time I've ever told this story in public before real people. And so, because I recognize my limitations, what I want is people who can understand this story and take it further, take it into their creative energy and make it their own, do it a different way. But this is the story to me, the overstory that we need to begin to really unify. Even the mainstream is part of our movement. But they don't know it yet. And this is the kind of story we can, maybe not every detail, but getting this way of thinking about what the bigger picture is something I think we can work towards.
Anybody? Oh,
Sebastian.
here we go.
We'll go back there after.
First of all, thanks for the entertaining story.
Good.
And it's interesting because it puts some things into perspective that I think are really crucial. And what for me is most, touching in a way is to really look at, okay, so where are we coming from as a species, right? And I've always been interested in seeing, okay, so what do indigenous cultures do, and how are they? Are their ways of life and also their stories and their wisdom more in line with keeping this planet livable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then being faced with the crisis we are faced with, which is threatening extinction, it's serious, right? It's no fun. The Piper is really serious with us right now. Puts what we are doing on a whole new level, right? It's way more than just we're doing what we think is right? We do that, right? What we do with our schools, we do because we feel that it's just normal to treat children as equals, that it's just their right to be treated in a respectful way, and that it's that just feels right. But putting it into that perspective, right? It shows that it's about everything pretty much. And then if I see the young human beings that leave our school, I see that. I see that they, without us forcing on them a curriculum about climate change or something, right? We don't force them to look at the planet and like, you need to be menders, and right, we don't need to do that. They grow up knowing that they are able to take responsibility, so they trust in themselves to do it. Plus, they see that something's wrong with the planet. Not each and every one of them will do that. They will make all kinds of choices, right? But I see a lot of willingness to take responsibility and the trust in themselves to do so. So I love the story. I'm more pessimistic about the speed in which we can do that, right? Compared to the speed of the piper. So that's interesting. Right. And in that way, I really liked your words in the end, saying like, it's not all about us, it's about everything, right? It's about the public. We are part of the schooling system, and the public schools, they can learn from us. So we have a responsibility in that way also to pass on what we've learned. And it's not about telling them, look, our values are superior to yours. Right. The way that we treat children is better, and you're just plain evil. Even though I sometimes feel that way, right? If I see how children are treated, and it's hard. But still, like to change that story in a way that is more like, hey, we are part of this change, and here's something we have to offer. Right. Yeah. So thank you for the perspective.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say in response to that is that so the title of the talk is Most Schools Transmit a Cultural Disease. When someone's sick, we don't blame them. We don't, they're not at fault, but we do things to take care of them. And so the shift in this story now is like, oh, I'm infected with the breaker culture. I'm trying to get over it. Being a mender is not about being superior or being, I accept that I'm a breaker. But I also recognize now that there's an infection, and I have to fight off the infection. I have to figure out what that looks like. What is the medicine that I need? What is the therapy that I need? What is the intervention that will help me eliminate that, which may never be, some infections never go away, you just control their manifestation. And I suspect cultural infections like this may be that kind of thing. So it's about sort of and that's why I say, in this view, everyone who cares for children is part of our movement. It doesn't matter if they aren't doing it the way we think it should be done. That's the manifestation of an infection of culture. And that's what we need to fight. We don't need to fight them. We don't, punish people for being sick. We care for them. So that's the challenge. Let's go. There was another one? Yes?
Yeah. First of all, also thank you for the nice story. And I really liked how it started all organic and put emphasis on this organic growth of wisdom, education, and so on. But I really liked starting so early on with the early stages of life. But on the other hand, me personally, I had a feeling maybe it's just because it's late, but it was a bit lengthy. And
say that again?
It was a bit lengthy,
yes.
Too long with starting in the early stages of life, and then coming somewhere to culture. As a small picky remark, I also have cells don't have fun and don't decide. It's just evolution, and it's effective, but
yes.
Nevertheless, thank you for entertaining story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for really original story of evolution and schooling.
Thank you.
So I've read some parts of your book this morning, so it was a good,
Yeah.
good moment again to rethink what I've read, because it's like a lot of like subjects you could go deeper when you hear. So it's just something that popped up in my mind. I somehow very was the thought of that we are thinking about like simultaneously is going individual and society. Somehow this subject very touched me, like agency just individual, but we lose connection with society part, which you mentioned like as definition of agency.
Right.
So that sounded very important.
Which, coming to international conferences, brought that to my awareness. I only have one language, and I assumed that everyone's word for agency would be the same. And then I was at a conference, and someone said, "What?" and explained to me that he was a multilingual person, so I don't know which languages he was referring to, but he said, that doesn't exist in... Oh, in fact, we were in Japan, and our friend Alexander was saying that the word agency is almost impossible to translate into Japanese with this multitudes of meaning. So, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it won't make any sense for you, but it's just something that very like sounded newly for me. Symbol manipulation as books and everything we do, like we share, and sacred books. Like, of course, I understand it's like the picturing of and religious thing and schooling. It's so much connection in that. And you mentioned like how we figure it out how to be powerful as gods. And yeah, and it's like you say like cultural disease, and we like addicts to power, and we like kind of course it's like radical. It's not my thinking. It would be very sad, but like in a way it is like, and we even consume like our like younger generation to be in power of everything. So that's some, I don't know, new aspects of thinking about everything in education for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
I actually really liked that you started with talking about the atoms and then to the cells, and this process of evolution. That part kind of stuck with me, because in every situation where these organisms had to face a new challenge, it required them to like get together, and somehow there was a creative solution that probably would have seemed impossible at that time, and somehow overcame this challenge. And I think it actually ties really well to your ending, where now we are facing a new challenge, and it's the same, that we have to get together to find a creative solution that seems impossible. And like you said, like the new way of education, many people might say it's impossible, but turns out it can be possible, and it is, because we are already doing it.
Here we are. Yes.
So yeah, I liked that theme, like throughout the story.
Thank you.
That kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, that story conceit is, I acknowledge your point as well. It's a material process, it's evolutionary. But from a storytelling perspective, I had to use a conceit to convey this theme throughout. So thank you.